Hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. So, my friends, I have been seeing circulating around left-wing intellectual spaces, infecting the air, and then coming into people's discourses, this idea that critical race theory, or at least objections to critical race theory, are nothing more than examples of a quote-unquote moral panic. This was a claim that was made towards me, Gothics, and Karlin Borchenko when we debated Sam Holtley, Brill, and Aaron Rabinowitz, in the debate a few days ago. And this is also a claim that is getting a lot of traction amongst left-wing individuals in certain left-wing publications, like, for example, the New Republic, which put out an article. Alex Shepard put out an article saying the specter of critical race theory is rotting Republicans' brains. And so, when I first heard this defense, my mind immediately went for diversion. When you cannot defend the merits of an idea, try to convince your opponent that they're crazy, which is a classic idea of gaslighting. And given that many people who defend critical race theory do not operate with epistemic humility, this tactic is not surprising coming from them. However, it is much more effective to demonstrate why your opponent's claims are wrong than to attack their character. So, let's actually examine why critical race theory is anything but a moral panic and actually there is a justified response being pushed out against it. So, let's go back to first causes. First principles is what everything comes from. An apple comes from a tree. So we have to understand, in some ways, the tree and the nature of the tree to understand its fruit. So let's understand critical race theory and the nature of critical race theory to understand its results. So critical race theory, my friends, is simply, and this is a very highly contested definition, and the fact that it is highly contested kind of shows just how, again, how deflective a lot of critical race theory's proponents are. It is a movement which rests upon certain assumptions about the nature of American institutions, the nature of American society, and the prevalence of white supremacy in both. It is a movement that believes that white supremacy is ordinary, as was said before, ordinary to American institutions, and that systems of power, which are institutions, have been used to oppress black folks in America, and the impacts of those oppressions are currently happening because the systems are still going on, and groups are still being quote-unquote marginalized. That is what critical race theory is, in a movement which rests upon the assumption that racism is integral to the fabric of America and that it's activated through institutions. But here's what's interesting. This did not become a national story. Critical race theory did not become a national story because of critical race theory. Critical race theory became a national story because its methodology is being used in education curriculum. Henceforth, we are here with the 1619 Project. So a year or so ago, when President Trump decided to ban divisive concepts from the federal government with an executive order, this is when critical race theory began being pushed to the public spotlight. And also, in 2019, when it was like the few hundredth year anniversary of 1619, the 1619 Project was indeed launched. It was launched by the New York Times person called Nikole Hannah-Jones. Now, Nikole Hannah-Jones has made very clear that her education system, in her opinion, teaches facts about America, and these facts are foundational to America. Take a look here. Don't take my word for it. Take a look.
1719 is as important as 1776.
Yes. Our decision to buy that first group of 20 to 30 Africans would influence almost everything that would follow after. I think it is foundational. It is as foundational to who we became as a country as our decision in 1776 to break off from the British.
Here. Okay, so as you see, she says that slavery is foundational to America's existence. This is simply one of the many claims which constitute the ethos of the 1619 Project. There was another essay in the 1619 Project. It's basically a broad curriculum of essays and educational materials for teachers to take in the classroom and use to talk about racism, race, slavery, and American history of slavery. And so, the 1619 Project has been adopted in over 3,500 classrooms according to Pew. Over 3,500 classrooms. And materials like the one I'm about to read have been taken and are taught as fact. This is from an essay written by someone in the 1690 Project. If today America promotes a particular kind of low-road capitalism, a union-busting capitalism of poverty rages, gig jobs, and normalized insecurity, a winner-take-all capitalism of stunning disparities, not only permitting but awarding financial rule betting, a racist capitalism that ignores the fact that slavery didn't just deny black freedom, but built white fortunes, originating in the black-white wealth gap that grows annually wider, one reason is that American capitalism was founded on the lowest road there is. And here's something from Nicole Hannah-Jones, the one who founded the 1690 Project. She says, profits from black people stolen labor helped the young nation pay off its war debts and finance some of its most prestigious universities. It was the relentless buying, selling, insuring, and financing of their bodies, not their beings, their bodies, that's what they say, and the products of their labor that made Wall Street a thriving banking, insurance, and trading sector, and New York City the financial capital of the world. So essentially, the economic success of America, according to Nicole Hannah-Jones, and according to her curriculum, is predicated upon black suffering and black oppression. These assumptions come about through critical race theory methodology, because critical race theory analyzes the relationship between race and systems of power, and for these people, for proponents of critical race theory, capitalism is most certainly a system of power. Hence, when someone criticizes critical race theory, what they're actually criticizing are the tenets of the 1619 Project, which are 100% being adopted and implemented into school curricula. But let's go further. The Department of Education published a proposal on April 9th that put federal guidelines for a grant program to teach people civics. And they cited Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist as an example of what this new civics program in American high schools would entail. And they also cited the 1619 Project as an example as well. My friends, the 1619 Project simply poses a certain idea, a certain interpretation of America's history of slavery. It does not pose fact. It may try to use facts to distort and then make its own analysis, but it does not pose facts. Education is in the business of making the man, as the classics believe, as the ancient Greeks believe. But what they're really doing here, they're not posing facts about history, because Nicole Hannah-Jones said that slavery is a foundational tenet of America. That's not a fact. That is a statement of values predicated upon using certain incidences throughout American history to make a statement. That's all it is. And yet it's being taught as fact. And this, my friends, it explains the genesis for so many anti-critical race theory bills in state houses, which are moving to ban the public schools being able to teach this kind of stuff. And yet, this is still called a moral panic. So critical race theory has had a sort of progression throughout American society, American history. It went from belief, a theory in the 70s, to coding itself in facts, and then being adopted in policy. So the idea that, again, American history was born in 1619, well, this is obviously not a statement that is necessarily true, because American history itself is so much bigger than one occurrence, but you can have a basis for slavery, being the beginning of something in America. So they'll use a historical fact to make a statement of principle and not actually consider if the historical fact actually supports the statement of principle. America, my friends, was not founded on the oppression of others. America's moral foundations include the inherent human equality of others, bound up in the idea of natural law, which confirmed the idea of natural rights, which, as the founders were influenced and articulated by people like John Locke, by people like Hugo Grotius a long time ago. America was built upon that. Yes, it was not always reflecting those values into policy, but America was built upon those simple moral facts. And so to say that slavery is foundational to America is to ignore the fact that America's philosophical foundations are absolutely antithetical to slavery. And yet, this is what Nicole Hannah-Jones and her project do and are doing across America. This is what Ibram X. Kendi, in his book How to Be an Anti-Racist, explains. Kendi does not believe that the Declaration of Independence can be viewed as a sort of separate moral document outside of a dichotomy of racism and anti-racism. Kendi believes that everything has to either be racism or anti-racism. In fact, Kendi was very clear. He said that there is no race neutral. There's either racist or anti-racist. The only way to beat current discrimination is through future discrimination. That's what Kendi's saying. That is the foundational ethos of 1619, of Kendi's anti-racism, and these things are predicated upon critical race theory methodology. It's just that simple. But, words are also very interesting things too, my friends. Words are very interesting things. So the word panic comes from the Greek word panikon. Panikon, I'm probably mispronouncing that. And that basically simply means pertaining to Pan, the god of woods and fields. And Pan was the source of a lot of mysterious sounds that caused people and herds of cattle and herds of people just to be confused and to not have any basis to their actions. So to panic simply means to have no basis to your actions, to be suspended in this sort of state of irrationality, this sort of state of irrational fervor. Moral, the word moral simply means moralis, which is the Latin word, which was translated into the old French word, which was then called moral, which is our common use of that word right now. And that simply is the proper behavior of someone in society. And this word has been translated to mean the certain kinds of ethical and moral conduct, that is proper, the certain kinds of actions that are good, righteous. Now, the problem with calling critical race theory a moral panic is that most of those critiques, calling it a moral panic, are based upon the idea that critical race theory and the 1619 Project are actually identifying facts about American history and not denigrating American history. So to people who agree with critical race theory, of course it seems like a moral panic, but again, that's not what it is. Because there is quite clearly, if we look at the etymology of the word panic, there is quite clearly occurrences and critiques of critical race theory that are mainstream that escape the purview of panic. No one is necessarily running around irrationally if they point out that Nicole Hanlon-Jones and her project is infiltrating educational systems. Over 3,500 classrooms have adopted them. That's not panic, that's a fact. No one is panicking if they believe that critical race theory teaches that our moral foundations as an American nation are racist. That's what Nicole Hanlon-Jones said, and that's what people who are in her curriculum say. And they're teaching that. That is a fact. So for the left to use the word panic is for them to show their egregious ignorance of etymology, and of language in general. These people are making philosophically dead critiques to opportunistically further their ideologies. According to the word panic, according to the word moral, this is nothing of the sort. Critical race theory is indeed embedded in the 1619 Project. It is indeed everywhere, and it is indeed making an impact. So this idea of this being a moral panic, it goes completely against the facts. It goes completely against the etymology of both of the words, and reflects, in my opinion, a tendency to deflect from the actual content of the matter. And the actual content of the matter confirms that the pushback against a lot of these tenets of 1619 in critical race theory is justified if you do believe that America is a fundamentally good country. If you don't believe that, then it may seem very odd to you. But if you believe that truth, then they are absolutely justified. So no, opposing critical race theory and the response to critical race theory that has been shown throughout America and the world is not at all evidence of conspiracism. It is not at all a panic. It is simply a reaction to the information that is infiltrating classrooms as evidenced by the existence of these educational curriculums. And it is, my opinion, not a moral panic, but a morally righteous reaction. Because America is a fundamentally good nation. Think on it. My friends, I love you, and if you love me, please support me. Patreon.com/officialcwatson. PayPal, officialcwatson@gmail.com. Locals, christianwatson.locals.com. I love you guys so much, and please stay pensive. Bye, guys.